pleasure today to introduce Pam Childers, the elected Clerk of the Court and Comptroller for Escambia County. Pam was first elected this past fall and took office in January this year, so she's been in this position for slightly over 8 months now. And she was kind enough to come give us a little update on the clerk's office today. I first met Pam a number of years ago when I served on the Pensacola City Council, and Pam was a finance officer with the city in the finance department. And I've known her off and on through the years in some of her volunteer roles and her professional roles. I guess 2 words come to mind. She's always presents herself in a very professional manner, and she doesn't lack for enthusiasm on anything she does, not the least of which was a terrific campaign that she ran last year. So I'd like to this time introduce Pam Childers to our Rotary Club, and thank you for being with us.
Small issues, this should work right. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay. Thank you for letting me share your lunch with you, and I do appreciate the opportunity to serve as the Clerk and Comptroller. I will tell you, I really enjoy the job. And so sometimes when you go to law school and get out and you think, I didn't want to be a lawyer, what am I doing here? That didn't happen to me. I campaigned hard for a position that I wanted, I desired, I felt that I was qualified for, that I could make a difference. And I've been drinking out of the fire hose for several months now, but I like the position and I think we're making headway. I guess I should start with a little bit about me before I tell you a little bit about the clerk's office. I haven't ever spoken to this group before, but I know a number of you individually, and so we've talked. But I am a CPA. I'm also a certified government finance officer, which I've had to take a test for both of them. So that's the capacity in which I've served for a number of years. And yes, I did start at the city of Pensacola there in the finance department, where I handled all the investment management, the accounts payable, the treasury, the bond issues, that sort of thing. So finance accounting is in my blood. That's what I enjoy doing. A little bit about my family. I'm married to Bruce Childers. Thank you for being here. I know your tea time is at 1 o'clock. Have fun. And he's really special when he'll make time for me on today, Tuesday. Anyway, we've been married, just celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary, have 4 children. Our daughter Krista is 21. She's working on her CPA exam, getting ready to go to law school. And Dr. Ussery, you were there for me when I was taking my CPA exam. I sure wish you were still teaching and ready and preparing my daughter, but she's a smart cookie, she'll figure it out. Our son Bruce is 19. He's over at FSU studying engineering. He likes robotics. Maybe there's a home here in Pensacola at the IHMC, which is quite fascinating what we have here in our town. We have a daughter, Lauren. She is 16. She's wide open. If you have a 16-year-old, you understand that. She got keys to a car, and mind you, we gave her an old, slow dump, and she is still running that thing around town, you know, and she's working for her own gas money, so she feels a little privileged to be able to take a couple extra trips wherever it is she's going. But no, she's really good. She's playing varsity volleyball. She's academically achieving, and we have a 14-year-old that just started high school that is only committed to football. He lives and breathes ball, and he's a good kid. We've enjoyed our family as a family unit. We've done a lot of volunteer work in this town, usually together, anywhere from Bill Bond baseball to starting back up NEP football to being mentors in Take Stock in Children at the IB program, teaching math in the school, reading at the school level. We tend to do sports and education because that's where our kids are, and that's what I enjoy, where I enjoy giving back. But it's been a lot of fun getting to know this entire community in all aspects, especially why we have our children right by our side, because they've learned to give to this community as well. And maybe I'll be blessed like some of you where our children return to Pensacola. I'm not real sure where their future will go, but Bruce is a 4th-generation Pensacolian. I'm from Las Vegas. It works. We're different, but it works. But again, I really do hope our kids come here. You might not think the clerk's office is that fascinating. I find it very fascinating. So I just thought I would tell you a few things about what I experienced and kind of where we are today. And I will tell you, I really enjoyed campaigning. It was hot. I will tell you it was hot. Summers are hot, but I'm glad I didn't have the rainy season that we have this year, because that would have been real hard with the signs and the hair and all that stuff. But I did enjoy knocking on doors. I enjoyed the street waving, talking to groups of people. It's pretty interesting because when you believe in your mission, if you believe in your goal, if you believe in the change you want to make because you can make a difference, it just burns inside of you. You're just passionate about getting it done. And yes, I have enthusiasm for what I do. And I really believed that we needed change in Pensacola. And so I came to you, the voters, and said, please give me a chance. I think I can make a difference. I can grow our community. We have technology advancements we need to embrace. And there's other things that we can do, and I really wanted to be your leader. So thank you very much for that opportunity. As I said, the first part of the transition, well, let me go back. I didn't have a transition. It was virtually non-existent. And just to give you an example, and kind of a funny example, I just have to laugh at myself sometimes when this happens, but I didn't know how to address a jury. It would have been comforting had the prior administration said, okay, Pam, now on Monday, here's a little script that you read and here's what you do. So instead, I walk in there, I'm ready to do the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, I'm going to do all the American kind of things that we do. I didn't know you didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance when you address the jury, when you're talking to the jury. So there were just some little things that I really didn't know, but we figured it out the next time we got it better. We raised our hand for the oath, and I was a little nervous to kind of skip that part. And we didn't do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we did have a script that the judge says, okay, this is what we need you to do to swear in the jury, because we had to do it for you after we got the jurors. But that's okay, it all worked out. And we didn't have to redo the trial or anything because I didn't know what I was doing. But I will tell you there were a lot more bigger things that I didn't know about as well. But what was most difficult is just walking in and drinking out of a fire hose, because the things that hit me, and I'll just hit the topics for you, if I can see my paper. At 47, that's it. I started glasses about 7 years ago, and they've gotten stronger and stronger. But the first thing that happened was, first, the top 6 in the administration left. It's hard to lose your foundation of an organization when the top 6 were leaving, because you have no one to ask questions of. They know how that cog was turning. We had a lawsuit about grand jury names. Things you may or may not know, the grand jury names are not public. They're not listed for you to look at. However, in Miami-Dade, that's different. They list all the names, and I have Susan Wolf here, which I will give some credit to her for stepping up, because the first thing that happened to us is we got a lawsuit against us. This guy has been working on this case for 10 years across the state of Florida, and he decides to file a suit in Escambia County. Okay, Susan, set up shop. We now have a legal department. So one thing we've been able to do is set up a legal department, not farm it out. Some things we do have to farm out. Susan can only handle so much. She's working 13-hour days, her dollar per hour is shrinking. But she is successfully handling this grand jury case. And when you have that coming at you so quickly, it's just, why us? Another thing that happened was the Navy Federal expansion. This is great, the Navy Federal is here, they're creating jobs, but guess what? Clerk's office, we're a picking ground. So there we lost the first 6, and now all of a sudden they're hiring somebody out of our court division or out of this division or that division. So we're losing staff members. Shortly thereafter, our HR individual decided to resign. So it's been pretty interesting having to establish the office and find out the foundation and either create it or find it, but we found ourselves creating it for the most part. One of the next things that happened to me more on the comptroller side, because you may not realize that this position is twofold back in 97, 98. Not only do you have the clerk of court, but you also have the comptroller side. So we got hit with the chamber audit. Thank you very much for Ron Jackson. We worked side by side in that audit with a good resolution, and thankfully so, because you got to remember that the world is flat. If you read the book, the newspaper is out there, everybody's reading it. Every now and then I get an email from Tom Baumfield. What's going on down there? If you recall, I used to be the city manager at the city of Pensacola. And sometimes the headlines, or most of the time, the headlines just don't really depict what's really going on. And so that chamber audit started off, as you know, very flashy, $80 million, $80,000 of cards gone, and as it turned out, most of that was accounted for, and some of it we just didn't have all the information to account for, but the margin of error was very, very low, and we moved on. Another drastic thing that happened in the first several months that we came to, I'm trying to hit the highlights because they only told me I had 15 minutes, so I'm talking very fast. So listen fast. I got time? Okay. We had all of the legislative changes in the 2013 session. The finance side was about the clerks. The court and the clerks have, I won't say they've been at odds, but let's say they have different funding mechanism in the general appropriations. And the courts want to tie the clerk's hands and be part of, if the court gets increases, then the clerk's office can get increases. Well, here's an example. Take your mortgage foreclosures that are bundled. 200 cases are bundled, the judge hears them. When they come down to the clerk's office, they unravel. They become 200 different cases. So our caseloads are very different. Our funding is very different. So what happened in the legislative session is that the clerks are now taken out of the general appropriation, and we've created a trust fund of our own, and we have something that the legislature body created that's like a court association. I tell you that because I had budgets to submit. I was trying to figure out what monies I had left, and I had to learn the old way and I had to learn the new way in just a matter of months when I was still trying to figure out how to address the juries. Why do we got to hire personnel, we've got an audit over here, so we were very spread out and trying to keep up with the legislature. The next thing that happened was the county made a decision to take over the regional library system. That is a big impact to the clerk's office or the comptroller's office. Just go with me, I'm going to use them interchangeably, but it's our office. With the library system, we are taking on an additional 90 employees, some full-time, some part-time. We're taking on all their contracts, everything that they spend. It's all running through our office. So once that transition is done, we are responsible for implementing it, for getting it right. So we're on the front end of that and made it to all the meetings about how are we going to do this, when are we going to transition it, how do we make sure the employees have the benefits. You're going from this system that the city has to this system that the county has, but we're all still government. And for instance, you have libraries, you have the actual structure, it's owned by the city, but now it's going to be the people and the contents are going to be the county, and the agreements were just long-winded trying to figure all of that stuff out between the city and the county. So we sat through those meetings and we have successfully transitioned and will, as of October 1, the library system. The next thing is the jail transition. No doubt that you've heard a lot about this, whether you've had somebody come and speak, or 2 people or 3 people, and you've read the paper. That came at us full force. Because again, we have to accept 440, 460 people we do the payroll. So we're doing all the payroll for them, so we've got to get the HR set up, we've got to transition their benefits, not to mention the contracts, whether it is the food, the commissary, the mental health, the hospitals, all of those contracts. I think there's like 33 contracts that are going to come through the comptroller's office that we need to make sure that we know that contract, we know how it's supposed to be paid out. We are the watchdog for that $360 million budget of the counties. And Susan, you and I have sat through meetings that are lasting 3 hours just trying to figure out who's going to own the CPR dummies. And you're thinking, gosh, this is trivial, but really, you got to sit through and decide who's going to own this stuff. And despite what the headline said in the paper, I was quite impressed with both Chief Deputy Eric Haynes and George Stewart. Once the county decided to take on the jail, and there's no right or wrong answer. If you look at our system, our circuit system, the jail is handled differently in just about every one of the counties, Walton, Okaloosa, San Rosa, and Escambia. It's not traditionally with the sheriff or traditionally with the county. Anyway, going back to, they did a good job. One sat on this side, the other sat on this side, and they talked. The other 25 of us just sat and absorbed. But it did affect us in one way or another, and I was very impressed of the details that they were able to work out. It was not an easy transition. It had the union complications. It had a sworn officer versus a correctional officer, which means benefit and status is different. We have buildings that we got to split. We have a sheriff's star that shouldn't be on the patches of the correctional office when they come over to the county. It was all those details, and I was quite impressed with them as to how they worked out the details. Now, I will tell you, sometimes one of them wanted to make a jab, but they'd make it with a smile, and of course the other one just made sure they had to have a comeback. But we tried to keep it on point, and I think when it was all said and done, I acted more of a mediator with them. But it was successful. We are still moving forward in a good path. Shouldn't be the cost that was once expected. It was just going to be insurmountable. It is doable. There will be overlap or duplicitous service, like a polygrapher. You will probably need one at the jail, and you'll probably need one at the sheriff's office. So there will be some duplicate positions, but we'll work through that. You'll transition, and then you'll find the efficiencies. So that's my little take on the jail. If you have questions, you can ask that later. The next thing that hit the clerk's office in the first couple of months that I was there, 2 weeks before we took office, e-filing mandates came on. This was one of the most significant changes in the history of the clerk's office for the state of Florida. And it went back to 2009, a Supreme Court mandate that said you will file electronically. You're not going to bring 5 copies to the court. You're going to go through a portal. When you flip that switch 2 weeks before we take office, I'm not prepared in a transition that did not happen for me. So there was a lot I had to learn. Fortunately, the staff that we brought on board, just 2 people, Susan Wolf, General Counsel, she is very astute, very good at her job, a good research person, a great communication. She understood e-filing from the attorney's perspective, and she brought her knowledge to the table and worked hard so that we didn't miss deadlines. We also brought in, because remember I lost 6 folks, so we also brought in Brenda Van Brussel from the court system, and she's our chief of staff. She was with Santa Rosa County. She had already done e-filing because Santa Rosa County is way far ahead than Escambia County. So she brought her knowledge, and 3 of us just constantly worked together with a very good staff there at the clerk's office. Those that remained, stellar. We were all working together. We did not miss a deadline, and I think we surpassed some expectations. So kudos to Susan for helping us lead that challenge of e-filing. Another thing that happens to us is the tobacco trials. And I think this is the jury that I totally messed up. But whatever. That was 2 when we get to do it again on Monday. What I didn't realize is when we have tobacco trials here in Pensacola, we have 500 or 600 jurors that come to the courthouse by 7:30 in the morning, and we've got to get them all going the right place, communicate with the judge, and it's like herding cats. They're everywhere, and then they're going to the wrong courtroom, and then they decide to stop to the bathroom or what have you. So we were getting them all together to go the right direction and making sure we weren't doing the pledge, that we were doing the oath. But we have, again, another jury trial. Does anybody have jury pool on Monday? Okay. Tobacco trials start Monday. So, the last thing I'll tell you that I did that is very positive like when we were drinking through the fire hose, is that they have clerk school. And I will tell you, I may not have had a good transition, but the state of Florida does an excellent job as far as training the clerks. I have 6 weeks of training to go to, and it helps tremendously. It just really helps me bring that information together and apply it. I don't get to bring Susan or Brenda. I absorb it, and we come back and we dissect it, and we figure out, okay, how do we apply it here? So we're all learning, but they do a really good job as far as clerk school. A couple of things that, just in wrapping up here before we have questions, that I could touch on some highlights, because that was just transition, and there's so much that's happened. Like I said, you may not be interested in it, but I am. I think it's a pretty neat place to work. For instance, jury. One thing that you get is $15 if you come up and you're on the jury panel or you serve as a juror. And that's probably not even the right, Susan's smiling at me. I know I didn't say that right, but you show up, you get $15. And then if you go cash the check, it costs you $8. So we got with the bank and we said, this is crazy. Yeah, this is a deal breaker. That's it. No more $8. So we got that fee waived. And I mean, these are just small things, but we got the fee waived. Another thing we did is, we have 180 people at the clerk's office. They are now required to do jury service. We've always sat on this side of the counter, and you're on that side. We don't know how we treat you. We don't know what we're telling you, or if it's the right way, or if you understand it. They now go through the process. So we just added 180 jurors to the pool. Interesting fact that I found out, am I down 1 minute? 1 minute. We probably summons 55,000 people a year, and maybe 11,000, 55,000, maybe 11,000 show up. So the percentages are just really small for jury service. I will skip everything else that I was going to talk to you about. I thought I talked fast enough to get it all in. I should have rehearsed this. Do I have a little bit of time? Okay, I'll just hit 3 or 4 things. The Century office. If you don't know, we have a building in Century, and it was underutilized. So what we did is we started taking some of the tapes for genealogy and sent it up there so they could do the research without having to come to Pensacola. We're also starting video court. It didn't make sense to me that judges and the entourage had to drive up there for 3 hours. Typically only have 1 or 2, at the most 5 or 6 cases. So we're doing video court. We're implementing that in October. The other thing we did is really has nothing to do with the clerk's office, but Fish and Wildlife. We applied to be a sub-agent so that they could get their hunting license or fishing license up there in Century, not having to come all the way to Pensacola. Technology. If you're a lawyer, one thing you'll find out is we are fast improving our communications to you. We're getting ready to turn it on, you'll have mobile apps, your calendar reminders that says be in court, or this is where you're at with your trial, or excuse me, your court docket, where you need to be. We're also doing escrow statements. It was crazy. It was a paper flurry when I walked into the accounting office one day. They have hundreds of lawyers, and they all do these filings, so they have an invoice. So they were taking the papers, every invoice for every attorney, and they were getting it all together, and then they were going to send it to them. And I'm like, where is the automation? So I grabbed a programmer, and I said, you got 2 days, let's automate this. So now we are automating our statements. It all flows into the general ledger, and we're going to send an email invoice to the attorneys. When you have 700, 800 attorneys here in town, that automation is really going to reduce the paper flurry that goes on in the accounting office. But I'll stop there. A little bit about our budget is that we have about a $10 million budget. 6.7 comes from the state, 2+ comes from the county, and then we earn about $1 million in fees. So that's a quick thing about transitions and tidbits and where we are.
Okay, we have plenty of time for questions, and in keeping with David's request, just anyone who has a question, please stand, identify yourself, and Pam can take it.
Ted Brown. Since becoming a realtor, I started appreciating more about getting information online, such as deeds and homesteadings and so forth. Is it going to continue to go further back? Because a lot of times I'll look up something and they'll just say, oh, microfilm. And some of it's not that old, maybe 8 or 10 years old. So you continue to put the stuff online?
Yes, 3 answers there. First, we're starting tax deeds. Oh, repeat the questions. He is a realtor, and he's wanting to know, when he does research on something, he needs to go back further than probably 84. I'm trying to remember where the cutoff is. And are we going to continue scanning that and making it available? The answer is yes. We're trying to go current and keep up with that. But we also just put tax deed sales online. They were, the courthouse steps. We changed it. We're changing that October 1. And we have recently hired someone that's going to come in and take our old records, and we came up with David, I don't know if you're involved in that, maybe Janet Holly, but we got 20 cents a page where they'll scan it for us versus the $1.20 that was costing a fortune. Cost was a big impact. Yes, we're going to go backwards and forwards. Forwards first. Yes, sir. That's probably taken the majority of my time. Why Susan has worked through a lot of the e-filing, mainly because of the jail transition, the library transition. I'm having to learn the budgeting cycle, all the contracts that there. I lost probably the top 2 on that side, so we've just recently hired 2 CPAs. Thank you, Ron Jackson. Sorry for the loss, but it does the community well. It takes a lot of my time, more so on the Comptroller's side, just in looking at contracts, trying to have resolution with the chamber, like some of their reimbursements that they need to do, how they should submit it so we can get it submitted timely, working with George Stewart in positions and what they can afford. I've decided with their help that we are a partner in the long-term health, financial health of the county. So I have stepped into that role, working on a loan for the IHMC. We work together for the health of Escambia County.
Pam, thank you very much for coming to visit with us today. It's pretty clear that our clerk of the court's office is in good hands and enthusiastic hands, I might add. We have a small token for you.
All right. Well, we also have, we're going to be donating a book in your name to a local school. This one is the color of this moon. So thank you for being here today. Before we wrap up, just a quick point of personal privilege. You hear a lot. Several years ago, there was an effort. There has been over the years, consolidated government. Whatever you think about the merits of consolidated government, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that you don't read about, hear about. Collaboration among not only the constitutional officers in the county, but also the constitutional officers among themselves. And for instance, a couple of things that the clerk, this is not universal around the state, is that for instance, some elections offices will do all of the payroll, all of the stuff on their own at an added cost to you, the taxpayers, through an agreement that we had it in place prior to Pam's administration, but they take all of our payroll functions, so that's an added expense that the taxpayers would not necessarily incur. In addition, we're getting creative now. We're in need of some space, some warehouse space, because we're getting some new equipment. We had some documents that we need some storage space for. They have our warehouse is down here on Blunt Street, behind barbed wire and all that, nicely secured. And there's a building in that same parking lot where it's the Clerk of Court's archive. So we started thinking, well, it's a pretty big building. I wonder if they have any room in there, because we need some space to store some things. Anyway, so I think a week from tomorrow, we're going to be beginning to store some of our stuff over there. So a lot of these things that you hear about, about the efforts to try to get your different stovepipes in the government to work together, a lot of that happens. And also, we've got a lot of things going on with the school system as well. So anyway, so that's just sort of a good thing that you may not be hearing a whole heck of a lot about, but at the end of the day, it benefits the taxpayers. So with that, thanks, Paul. Thank you, Pam, for being here. Next week, Bill Edmonds, State Attorney, will be here to give his take on things.